Good morning, everyone. It's great to see you all at the Competitive Europe Summit. My name's Laura Greenhalgh, and I'm the managing editor for Politico in Europe. And just a brief reminder before we head into the next conversation, the conversation's been really lively in the room so far, so please do make sure you're contributing on all of the social media platforms, and we'd love to hear your thoughts. So I'm delighted to be joined today by two of our Europe leadership from Revolut, the digital bank founded in 2015, for a conversation about Europe's competitiveness in digital services. I think we've heard some really interesting themes so far today, and I'm really excited to dig into what that means for your specific business in Europe. Joining me on stage today, we have Beatrice Cossa-Dumurgier, the CEO for Western Europe at Revolut. Relatively new to the company. You joined in June, previously at McKinsey, the French Ministry of Finance and BNP Paribas, so a great, long career in finance, but relatively new to the company. And Joe Heneghan, the CEO of Revolut Bank in Europe. You obviously continue to lead Revolut's Lithuanian licensed bank, and you've been at the company since 2019. I'm really struck as we kind of get into the conversation about competitiveness in Europe. Obviously, relatively unusual for me to have two CEOs joining me on stage. And I wanted to ask you, Beatrice, does that, in a sense, illustrate some of the challenges for the company as you've built this brand in Europe?
Thank you very much, Laura, for having us on stage today. It's a real pleasure to be here. And yes, indeed, Revolut's growth over the past 10 years has been just tremendously successful. Europe today is about 2/3 of Revolut globally, with more than 40 million customers. We operate in about 30 countries. And again, with a very fascinating growth. We've probably been the bank providing in the last 5 years the most innovation of all any other banks. So that has been actually phenomenal. And this has been achieved in a context where indeed regulation in Europe remains fragmented. We know that it's not fully harmonized all across. We know that we have some duplication of compliance hurdles here and there. And so in this context, as always, when we look ahead and we want to continue build a very strong and sustainable and successful growth, so we've thought of what would be the best solution to achieve that. And what we found out is that actually having a dual hub strategy would be the best possible option. So we have announced that we are going to create for Western Europe another bank in Europe, so located in Paris, covering all Western Europe with 6 large markets. So besides France is Germany, Italy, Spain, Portugal, and Ireland. And the rationale for this is essentially business-driven, first of all. France is actually the largest country in Europe with more than 6 million customers. It's also the fastest growing one. And it's the fastest growing country in the world, actually. So that made a lot of sense to have this second hub located in Paris. And then when you look at what Revolut is and what our strategy has always been, is to be a global player, but also with local roots. And so what we want is to leverage innovation for localization. So we want to be even more local, proposing for local customers in all of these geographies, even more local financial services, innovation, and specificities. What we also want to achieve, actually, is to leverage the fantastic talent pool that we have in Western Europe. We have announced that we will hire 400 at least people to actually staff the HQ, but also reinforce local teams. And so that's a fantastic news. And last but not least, for the audience in this room, it's of course essential to increase our interactions with local regulators, with local policymakers, with local ecosystems. So this is absolutely key, and I guess no one here will say otherwise.
So just jumping off one of the points you made to bring Joe into the conversation, you mentioned the fragmented market. Joe, I wanted to ask you, in your time at the company and with your experience, do you feel like the EU has done enough to encourage the kind of cross-border banking, digital services, and also, I mean, throwing it forward, what would you like to see policymakers do differently?
Thanks, Laura. I'm delighted to be here. I would say, we talk a lot in the last year about things that we don't have in Europe and our productivity gap with these important reports, the Letta and Draghi reports, and the need or the expectation that for the size of the European economy, we should be producing maybe more global champions, more global scale companies. So I think it's well recognized now that we are not doing enough. We need to do more. We caught the tail end of the last panel. There should be a sense of that Europe is almost in crisis mode. Certainly that there's existential threats, and the world is rapidly changing around us and accelerating in that regard this year. So I definitely think there's more that policymakers can do. In Europe, a lot of companies, in particular financial services companies or fintechs, they don't go cross-border, or they can't, and that's because there's barriers. The single market is wonderful. From our base in Lithuania, we're able to passport into every European country. But every country we go to, you don't find that things are the same from country to country. They're all different. And that slows you down. So if you want to go cross-border, if you want to transfer your company's success from being a national champion to a regional one in Europe by going to the next country or the next 2 or 3 or 4 countries, that's difficult to do. It requires a lot of investment. It requires a lot of customization, and that's potentially too expensive for certain businesses. We're probably the exception in that we've been so successful in terms of our customer adoption, how much customers have taken to our proposition, the strength of our product market fit, that our customers recommend Revolut to the next person. And that's been a massive part of our growth in the early years. We're only a 10-year-old company, but that has enabled us to potentially gain or reach profitability sooner. And therefore, we have the financial power to invest in the things we need to invest in order to go cross-border and kind of triumph over sort of the blockers we meet. Key blockers we meet, IBAN discrimination is the top one. So, under European regulations, a bank account should be usable and accepted in any country, and it simply isn't. There's, every country basically, there hasn't been enough cross-border maybe activity for everyone to have to adapt to the fact that I must accept this IBAN or account number from another country. So that has caused us to incur the cost of having to establish freedom of establishment and creating branches in certain countries. So we've now established 9 branches. That allows us to localize and create a local account number, a local IBAN in those countries. Similarly, for payment schemes, in some countries there are quite dominant payment schemes created in the local market. There's a barrier there that if you want to join them, you often need to be a localized branch or have localized IBAN, so they're only for local players. That's another great example of fragmentation. If a business, successful fintech or bank wants to cross the border, they're going to have challenges doing that. Then you can look at other things like open banking, fantastic innovation, something that should really create fresh competition in markets, enable new entrants and new players. And again, we see a big divergence in how that has actually been implemented. So while we've created a lot of rules and regulations, if we don't actually enforce them and make them come to life, we're not getting the benefit of them.
You've given a couple of really interesting examples, specific examples there of Europe making laws and you feel like they haven't been enforced well. Yeah. I'm also struck that there's obviously a lot of conversation in Brussels right now about simplification and also changing the laws. I appreciate it's not either or, but if you were to ask European policymakers to focus more on enforcement or simplification, what would you say is the most important for you right now?
I think you can't do one or the other, because that's a failing. We need to simplify because we've made things far too complicated for ourselves in some domains. So that is the right thing. We need to look at that. Unfortunately, to simplify, you have to reopen the book in some of the regulations to simplify or change them. But we have some good regulation that's created good opportunities for European companies. But if you don't enforce them or don't see them to life, then not only is the first regulation not much use to your businesses, but neither is the second one you're working on simplifying. Again, if you're going to simplify that and then not enforce it or bring it to life, it's basically pointless. So I think that's something Europe needs to get better at. You can do both, because actually the policymakers are not the ones really doing the enforcement. They obviously usually give that to other agencies in each national country, the job of doing some level of enforcement. So I think we need to see both happen.
And Beatrice, what would your top asks be for the policymakers here today?
So definitely very aligned with what Joe's just said. You know, the key recipe for success for a digital bank is scale. So when you want to be, and why is that? Because scale allows you, of course, to gain economies of scale. It allows you to operate in a very efficient manner with low operating costs that in turn translate into very convenient and affordable services, which is definitely good for customers. So when you want to operate successfully a digital bank, you need scale. And for local digital banks, which could be very successful in a given market, it's sometimes extremely complex to just cross-border because it requires a very heavy investment. Investment in money, investment in resources, investment in better understanding the regulation, which actually is different. And sometimes it's probably not different, but it's not enforced the same way. So this creates really hurdles. So the real ask for the regulators and policymakers in this room is to make things as simple as possible, as harmonized as possible, and to enforce them in the same way. So this will definitely foster innovation, this will foster competitiveness, this will allow players like us to actually bring to market better product, better innovation for customers. Somehow governments for the last 20 years have kind of pushed for more cross-border consolidation or even consolidation within borders for traditional banks. And it has proven to be extremely difficult to achieve because usually execution risks outweigh the synergies, the value that could be derived from these cross-border mergers. So this has not happened that often, a little bit, but not that often. We are actually a truly pan-European player. We are the first one to be extremely, this is our DNA, to be digital and pan-European. We don't have this legacy to deal with. So allowing players like us to actually operate in a seamless manner all across border is what will allow us to innovate even better and to provide to all customers in Europe very convenient, innovative, and affordable products. So this is really the path that we should follow.
All right, I might add one, if it's okay.
Yeah, please.
I think one of the issues we've seen grow across Europe since the pandemic has been fraud and criminal activity moving to online channels. So because we operate across every European country, we can see how those trends are developing. And this is something that's being discussed at the moment. It's like trying to address the fact that where the fraud is coming from is really telecoms, people's phones constantly ringing, text messages being inserted into legitimate text message chats, and then social media companies and online platforms where the wave of fraud, as we see it, 54% of all fraud that our customers fall victim to, they're actually defrauded on a social media platform. They buy a good that doesn't exist, never is delivered. They get a message saying, send us €100 to apply for this job. There is no job. Or they're presented with a nice graphic of some politician or famous person saying, you know, I'm promoting this investment. It's a fake investment. And people have their money stolen. And right across the financial system, we're dealing with this increased wave of fraud, and we're trying to bolster our defenses. Revolut is a modern company with modern technology and has very sophisticated machine learning models, generates a huge amount of interventions to protect customers and warn them when we see suspicious things. Last year, I think we prevented about £600 million worth of fraud, but our customers are still fooled by fraudsters before they ever get to taking the money out of their bank account. So that's something that we really need to see Europe step up and address in terms of like where the liability for these fraud costs should lie, not really just in financial services, but at where the fraud and the criminal activity is happening, which is typically and to a great extent on social media platforms, as well as on telecommunications channels. Yeah. That's something that we have to tackle. It's just going to keep getting worse otherwise. As long as criminals continue to succeed, they will pour more of their resources, more gangs will target our citizens in this way.
And as you say, that's very connected to a big political fight, going on right now about the interplay between Brussels and the big tech platforms, to what extent there is both regulation and enforcement. I guess to ask a follow-up question there, do you fear that Brussels might be too beholden to the US interest in that space and too timid to sort of do what you feel is necessary on the big tech platforms?
I don't know that. I don't believe that to be true. But I think we have to find the appropriate place to put it into legislation and try and force this to be a thing that isn't applied just to, say, American companies, if that's what we're talking about, but to any platform or any company, any telecoms operator. There should be a level playing field. And when it comes to crime, like any crime, all parts of society should be unified in our interest in sort of preventing crime. It doesn't feel like that is, and yes, we probably do have to take to hand, and as we have done and Europe has done in numerous other ways with American platforms and companies, to say, you want to operate in our market, you have to adhere to our laws and our standards.
And then jumping off that point to talk about another kind of big theme in Brussels, one is obviously, the interplay around the tech world in the finance world. The other is the digital euro, which is, something that people are really talking about now in this town. Beatrice, I wanted to turn to you and sort of ask, in a sense, do you see that? How do you see that disrupting your business or changing your approach? And what would your asks be of the ECB on that front?
So us at Revolut, we're very pragmatic, very business-oriented and customer-focused. So any initiative that will bring innovation, competitiveness, and actually sovereignty as well, we definitely welcome it. So the digital euro is definitely along these lines, and we will be very happy to contribute. We are, of course, looking forward to better understanding the type of innovation it will eventually bring and welcoming the ability to contribute to an initiative that, among many others, is going hopefully at some points to provide customers with additional benefits, customers and merchants with additional benefits.
Do you see something like the European Payments Initiative as even more important in this space? Or?
Actually, the timeline is not the same, and the dynamic below is not the same. So I don't think we should favor one over the other. Again, we are pragmatic and very customer-focused and business-oriented. So we were the first digital bank to contribute to Euro. We're very proud about that. And again, Euro, as the digital euro being pan-European initiative, they are very consistent with our DNA. So this is, again, very much the type of initiative that we want to contribute to. We're very proud to do that and very much welcoming their success in the various fields they are going to cover. We believe in innovation, basically. We believe in competitiveness. And these two initiatives, and there are certainly many others, are actually reinforcing also European sovereignty, which definitely is good for the European banks that we are representing here today.
Thank you. We're wrapping up soon our time here, so as a sort of closing thought, and definitely jumping off the conversations we've heard already this morning, I wanted to ask you, essentially, how big of a gap do you see between Europe's ambitions in your space and its actions? And as a sort of cheeky follow-up, how confident are you that the current European leadership can close that gap? Joe, you first.
Yeah, I don't think we should doubt ourselves, but we need to push ourselves. So there's a lot of talk. We're a year on from the Draghi report. We had to effectively implement a full new commission and new people in all those roles. So you do need a little bit of time, but we should see momentum starting to build, and that's the key thing. Are we going to see Europe and European leaders really push hard? Of course, the tariffs developments this year is a massive distraction as well, and it's these are critical issues for Europe. But I always feel that we should be optimistic. Europe is a successful continent. It's a successful place for our citizens to live their lives. I think on Savings and Investment Union and sort of the announcements this week around the next steps there around financial literacy, but also encouraging citizens to invest. Revolut, I can tell you, we've over 40 million customers in Europe, but 8 million of those have engaged in an investment product with us. 2.5 million of those have engaged in money market funds. And we believe that most of those consumers across Europe never had access to those products before we brought them to them. So in the space of 18 months, we've had these 8 million customers invest 12 billion euro through Revolut, through our MiFID license entity. So, and many of them are investing small amounts. So this is not the rich of Europe who are investing. This is the ordinary people of Europe who are getting engaged in investment products because we make them available to them. So I think in terms of this ambition of building our capital markets, of building SIU, getting people to invest, Europe can succeed at these things. It needs to create the right conditions. Again, I won't bore you with some of the kind of blockers we run into, but I think the potential, that shows me that there is great potential for these big ambitions that we have, and I suppose championed now by the Commissioner Albuquerque. They're there as opportunities for us, and Revolut will certainly be helping to deliver on those. So
what I'm hearing from you is optimistic, but you'd like to see some things kind of coming to fruition.
We
soon.
always need to push harder.
Yeah.
We need to really push harder.
Yeah. And Beatrice, to you, I mean, as a closing thought, how big a gap do you see between Europe's ambitions and reality, and how confident are you in the next phase?
So I'm extremely confident because I'm a very optimistic person. Europe is a democracy, has to remain a democracy. Financial services is actually a way to promote that, and we should be collectively, as citizens, but also as banks and businesses, very cautious about what's happening elsewhere to defend our values and ensure that they are well protected. So to me, we need to act fast. We don't have that much time. We need to be very simple and very pragmatic, and ensure, again, as much harmonization as possible across Europe, because this is what makes us strong.
Thank you so much. I think that's a wonderful conversation point to take into the networking break. So thank you so much for joining me today. And yeah, the networking break will take place in the main networking area, and look forward to seeing you there. Thank you.
Are united in diversity. We are very heterogeneous in our opinion.
We are doing this in our open democracies. Discussion is all open and loud, and I'm not for that.
What is European Union? What is freedom? How we learn together.
The obvious question is, what is the EU doing? What is our plan?